Is the time and place for a meeting of the Beaverton Planning Commission. For the record, I will do a roll call to verify which commission members are participating this evening. Commissioner Winter. Commissioner Speck.
Here.
Commissioner McCann.
Here.
Commissioner Metler.
Here.
And Commissioner McAvoy.
Here.
Let the record show that Commissioner Holmes is excused and absent from the meeting tonight. We are now at Commission Communications. Commission, any communications? Looks like no communications. We are now at staff communications. Staff, any communications?
Chair, yes. I'm Brian Martin, Long Range Planning Manager with the City of Beaverton. I have 3 short items. The first is I just wanted to let you know the City Council adopted the town center maps that the Planning Commission considered recently. Those should be effective next month. And then a couple of citywide interest items. Regarding fiscal sustainability, like many Oregon cities, Beaverton faces a structural budget deficit driven by expenses outpacing revenue growth, further strained by tax limitations at the county and state level. Despite significant efforts to improve our financial position, funding gap remains. To address this, the City Council is actively exploring additional strategies to stabilize the finances in both the near and the long term. These included potential revenue-generating options such as a city service fee, a local option levy, and a street maintenance fee. The next discussion that the Council will have will take place at 6 p.m. December 9th. Council will review further financial research and explore additional options. They won't make any decisions that night, but the conversation will help shape the path forward. So anybody watching is welcome to attend that. Also, we have a way to celebrate the season. The Winter Lights and Tree Lighting event is coming up. You're invited to kick off the holiday season at that ceremony, which is 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. December 5th at City Park in downtown Beaverton. Full details are at beavertonoregon.gov/winterlights. All the announcements. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. The first item on the agenda is a work session on the Transportation System Plan. The order of the work session tonight will be as follows. We will begin with the city staff presentation, followed by discussion and questions of staff by the commission. The Planning Commission will then hear public comments regarding the work session item. Individual comments will be limited to 5 minutes and must be directed toward the work session item. The Commission may ask additional questions of individuals providing comments or staff. We will now begin with the staff presentation presented by Senior Planner Jessica Engelman.
Thank you for having us this evening. My name is Jessica Engelman. I work in the Long Range Planning section for the city, and I'm managing this update to the city's transportation plan. I'm joined by Rob Zeller. He did a lot of the engagement work, coordinated it over the summer, so is here to really answer any questions about that you may have at the end of the presentation. So I'm going to just jump in right away. We have a lot to cover, and I think that you'll be interested in hearing about it, and we're really looking forward to hearing your thoughts. We've been working on 2 fronts over the past 6 months. We've been analyzing what's out there today, so looking at what works, what's not working. We've also been talking with community members about where they like to go, where they would like it to feel safer. And in general, we've just been listening, mapping data, learning, looking for patterns, synthesizing what we're hearing and learning into a coherent narrative that I'm going to be presenting this evening, and which is going to influence a lot of the work. Oh, sure, no problem. Going forward. Okay. So I'm going to walk you through a handful of takeaways, but first I'd like you to turn your attention to the map that is going to be on the screen. This is a great example of how that analysis work and the engagement work really went hand in hand and interfaced with each other. What you're seeing is on the left, we have a map of Beaverton street system. It's color-coded according to how many traffic crashes have occurred and how severe those crashes have been over a 5-year period. We looked at information from 2018 to 2022. That was what was available to us when we were doing this analysis. You'll see that the darker the color, the worse the crash history. Blues and purples, those are streets owned by the city, by the county or the state, and reds and oranges are streets owned by the city. And then on the right, you can see locations where people told us they wanted it to feel safer. And if you compare the two maps, you can see that there are several similar locations that light up. We're looking at Allen Boulevard, Denny Road, Cedar Hills Boulevard, Canyon, Farmington, generally our downtown. And what this is telling us is that people instinctively know the conditions in which they're potentially at a higher risk of harm when they're trying to get around the city. There are also locations on this map that by the 170th over by the nature park, where there was not as much historic crash data, but people were telling us that they still were not feeling safe. And so this is really helpful to understand because we not only want to be reactive, we want to be proactive. So this was very helpful to hear from the community and understand what the historic data wasn't telling us. So moving forward, our task is the next task is to re-examine what we'd like as a community for the transportation system and propose a future network and future street designs that can help us reach our goals, one of which is safety. But before I jump into more findings, I want to talk a little bit about the community engagement activities that we did in those 6 months between April and September. The purpose of this was really to hear from community about their travel experiences getting around the city. And we asked 3 questions. The first was, where do you go? The second was, where would you like it to feel safer? And the third was, what do you think of some future street types? And we brought out designs and showed them to folks. Community volunteers took a lead role in developing and implementing that engagement strategy. I believe some of you are familiar with the project's transportation ambassadors, but just to recap, staff recruited for a group of volunteers, and they conducted culturally relevant engagement activities and also considered ways to connect with the broader Beaverton community. They spent a year getting up to speed, learning and building their skills with the guidance of city staff and the consultant team, and each of them drafted their own engagement plan and went out into the community this summer with the support of staff, really engaging folks in a number of different ways, which I'm going to talk about. We used a variety of tools. Oh, I did not, well, go to the next one. We used a variety of tools, both in-person and virtual, to engage with folks. And some of those tools asked all 3 engagement questions. Some of them really just focused on one. For example, we had an in-person activity where we set up large printed maps and easels and invited participants to place pins on the maps, showing us where they like to go, where it wasn't feeling safe. We also used written questionnaires, one-on-one interviews, focus groups to gather information. We had a couple of very specific activities. So we had like a piece of paper that people could mark up where they had safety concerns. We also had this lookbook that people could look through all of the different street designs, leave sticky notes in it telling us what they liked, what they had concerns about. Online, we had a story map and a survey posted that allowed people to do very similar things, zoom in and out, leave digital pins on a map, and then also leave comments for us. So between April to September, those 6 months, we received 2,800 responses from folks. So we had a pretty good response rate. The ambassadors engaged people through a variety of means. We had those focus groups. They tabled at citywide events, like at the library, they met with business owners, and they attended neighborhood association committee meetings. Staff also led events, so we met with, for example, a focus group for the Safe Routes to School High School Advisory Committee, and overall, we feel like we connected, we believe we connected with residents from all around the city, all the neighborhoods. We were able to get out to many of those NAC meetings, and then also just hear from people at the citywide events as well. So let's jump to the first, thank you, I appreciate that. The first community takeaway, which is that travel is essential for living, beyond just getting to work. Community members said that they need to travel for shopping and recreation and jobs and school and social activities and lots of things. And importantly, they conveyed that these trips are often not discretionary. They are truly necessary for meeting the daily needs and maintaining an overall sense of well-being in their life. So we have the top 10 destinations up here. These are the places where, is it? Oh, there's a delay. These are the top 10 destinations where folks told us that they like to go. We often heard how a lot of these popular destinations also serve as community hubs for people where they like to gather. Places like the Beaverton Library, Farmers Market, Cedar Hills Crossing, they're really valued for both their mix of services, but also for that social connection and opportunities that they provide folks. And our analysis work reinforced what we were hearing out in the community. Trip information gathered from census data and state travel surveys and regional modeling information showed us that resident employees regularly make local trips under 3 miles, and they're traveling for lots of reasons other than just going to work. Of trips that begin in Beaverton, 71% are taken for purposes other than going to work. So, for example, going to school, running an errand, shopping, recreation. And what we heard from community members and what we saw in some of the data that we had access to is that grocery stores are pretty universal in their importance to community members. In addition to schools and parks, it's going to be really important to consider how our pedestrian, our bicycle, our transit networks can connect up to these retail destinations. Most students looking at schools take the bus or are driven to school. Walking and biking are less common, but some schools do have higher rates. They tend to be north of US 26 in neighborhoods that we see higher household median incomes. When considering work trips, most people, about 2/3 of people drive to work, and a significant number work from home. About 1 in 5 folks work from home, and the people who are working from home tend to have higher incomes as well. There's about 10% of residents who use public transportation, walk, bike, or take a motorcycle or a taxi to work. Of that 10%, 5% of that is public transportation. The second community takeaway is that safety is a major concern for folks. We classified participant responses into 5 main categories: streets, intersections, transit stops, schools, and parks. On streets, we heard about fast-moving traffic, poor lighting, missing sidewalks, unprotected bike lanes. At intersections, we heard about long crossing distances, inaccessible ramps, drivers not yielding to pedestrians. And then when driving, people were talking about observing unsafe driver behavior, such as speeding, reckless driving, and they wanted more visible, well-defined spaces for people outside of the car, people who are walking and biking. And while not on this slide because of space limitations, transit stops were often described as feeling unsafe, especially along busy or isolated stretches of road. Community members noted that safer routes to school and parks, those are also very needed. These are the top 10 streets where people said that they would like it to feel safer. The streets probably aren't that surprising. We've got Canyon, we've got Farmington, Cedar Hills, TV Highway. These were all frequently mentioned as places where people wish that they could feel safer. And similarly, the top 10 list for intersections where people said that they wished that it felt safer. You might notice some common themes. Again, a lot of these intersections are on the streets that I just mentioned: Farmington, Canyon, Allen, Murray. If you don't see an intersection up there that you would have put on this list, I can say that the 11 to 20 lists were very close behind the top 10, so it was all very close, and there are several more that came up. I just want to emphasize here, talk a little bit about speed. Speed is just very dangerous. The black, blue, and purple image on the screen shows how several factors combine to heighten or lower risks for a person who is walking. So if you look all the way to the right in the black column there, you'll see how things play out if someone is driving at 40 miles per hour. At this speed, a person has a limited cone of perception, meaning they essentially have tunnel vision. They can't mentally process what they're taking in outside of a very narrow view. So if someone unexpectedly crosses their path and they need to stop, it's going to take them over 300 feet, so about the length of a football field, to actually come to a complete stop. And with that speed and that volume, that comes an immense amount of force that is all discharged into the car into the thing that the car hits. In this case, a person walking who does not have a protected shell around them to shield them from that actual impact. So as a result, the person has about an 80% chance of dying from the collision if they're hit by a car going at 40 miles per hour. As the speed gets lower, the cone of perception widens, that stopping distance lessens, the force from that collision is reduced, and so the person's chances of survival does go up. That's the purple column. However, at 30 miles per hour, the odds are still not great that the person is going to be able to walk away from that collision without a serious or incapacitating injury. Once we get all the way over to the left in the blue area, down to speeds of 20 miles per hour, you can see that the cone of perception is far wider. The stopping distance is a third of what it was at 40 miles per hour. And as a result, that survival rate is actually going up exponentially to a 90% survival rate. So it's basically the inverse of the death rate at 40 miles per hour. So what this is showing us is that getting traffic speeds down to those less lethal speeds can really make a difference in helping people be able to keep each other safe. Because generally, when we were out there talking to people, people want to keep each other safe, even if that is not always obvious in all of the behavior that is witnessed. There is really a sentiment that no matter how people are traveling, they do want to keep each other safe. So these laws of physics really came through when we looked at where injury crashes occurred on streets in Beaverton. Nearly all crashes where someone was injured occurred on a street with a posted speed limit of greater than 30 miles per hour. And unfortunately, crashes resulting in injury are pretty common in Beaverton. If evenly distributed over 10 years, crashes that resulted in any kind of injury occurred approximately every 10 hours in the city. And this is when we're taking out crashes that occurred on our two major freeways, US 26 and Oregon 217. More severe crashes involving fatalities or those seriously incapacitating injuries happened roughly every 11 days in the city. And as the previous graphic explained, pedestrians and bicyclists, they take on a disproportionate share of that risk. When we looked at the crash data and considered past crashes in Beaverton, 42% of pedestrians and 28% of bicyclists involved in a crash were killed or seriously injured. That is compared to 6% of crashes involving motorists. Most of these serious injury or fatal crashes, they were occurring at intersections and on major roads, particularly arterials with multiple wide lanes, high traffic volumes, and those elevated speeds. So the third takeaway is that people are feeling forced to drive for all the trips they're taking, or they're feeling disconnected from parts of the city. Many said that they feel forced to drive because they don't feel safe traveling in other ways, walking, biking, or taking public transportation. Others who can't drive or don't drive indicated that they're feeling cut off from parts of the city because of the safety concerns that are out there. So those risks really translate into where folks feel comfortable walking and biking. These high-speed streets are essentially acting as barriers to getting to the key destinations that people want to get to. To illustrate this, we created a map of Schiffler Park, located in downtown Beaverton. You can see in the center of the map the park. You can see several red lines on the map. These are streets where the posted speed limit is greater than 30 miles per hour, or 30 miles per hour or greater. So using this park as an example, we wanted to understand a couple of things. The first thing we wanted to understand was who could access the park in roughly 10 minutes without having to cross over one of the 30-mile-per-hour streets. So that's the dark blue area here. The second thing we wanted to understand was who is within a 10-minute walk, but they're being cut off from it because of the 30-mile-per-hour roads. And you can see this in the hatched area. So these are areas where you're going to have to cross over, fast-moving traffic to get to it. You can see the entire south side of Allen, so that neighborhood, and then east of Hall Boulevard over by Elsie Stewart Center also it has one of these streets. The third thing is if you're trying to make a crosstown trip, you can see that there are several of these streets that you would have to traverse and contend with, all of which that create real and also psychological barriers for a person who is traveling. So we heard this from a lot of folks that just crossing these large, noisy, fast streets just feels really uncomfortable and unsafe. Even if they're doing it, they're not necessarily feeling great about it. So slowing down speeds on these streets, redesigning intersections to get folks across it, providing more protection for pedestrians, cyclists, transit riders. We're really seeing that these actions could potentially help expand people's comfort zones, right? And in turn, when you expand that comfort zone, you're also expanding connections and opportunities for folks. But we're not starting from scratch. We do have some things to build on. For example, 87% of the sidewalk network has a basic level of completeness. So that means that pedestrians can be physically separated from traffic on a raised sidewalk, walking or rolling around the city. That does not mean that they are ADA accessible or that they're all well maintained, and I'll get back to that in a minute. But in general, 87% have a sidewalk. On the right, you can see a map of pedestrian facilities in the city. All the areas with blue, pink, or purple lines are areas where there's either a sidewalk on both sides, those are the blue, and if there's a trail, it's pink or purple. Areas with red and yellow lines are areas where either there's a sidewalk gap on one or both sides. And you can see that we do have pockets where this is the case, over in the West Slope area, for example. But in general, most streets in the city have sidewalks. In terms of access to destinations, all destinations are accessible by car. And thinking about transit, downtown has several lines serving it, many converging at Beaverton Transit Center. Beaverton Transit Center is the third most busy transit center in the entire Portland metro region, so it does see a lot of activity. Fourth takeaway is that community members do have a strong interest in walking, biking, and taking transit if it feels safe, comfortable, and connected. Most people said that they would choose to walk, bike, or ride public transit more often if that experience made them feel safe and if it was more convenient. And this interest really spanned all age groups, especially when talking about short and local trips. So the quality of the facility really matters. Having something people will use is about more than just the existence of that facility. A great example of this are bike facilities, where we have painted lanes on over half of major streets in the city. But we still heard from folks that they don't actually see them as being viable because they still don't feel safe using those facilities. The fifth community takeaway was that different groups have different needs, but the common theme that we all want safer, more accessible streets. We heard from young people, they want to get to better ways to get to school, part-time jobs, parks, places to hang out with friends. Older adults, people with disabilities want smoother sidewalks, safer crossings, accessible transit stops. Caregivers, we heard they're wanting to feel confident that they can send their children or older adult family members out there and that they can travel safely and independently of them. And then the sixth takeaway is that people supported the future street designs that we put out there, the designs that prioritize safety, comfort, and community. Again, for this activity, we have participants look at the images and we got their thoughts on them. And generally, people like wide sidewalks, high visibility crossings, those tree-lined streets, and that idea that streets could be a place for gathering and for community. Many also expressed a desire for having spaces defined for each travel mode, and the speeds and designs that reduce speeds and help protect folks outside of the car. So with this in mind, I'm just going to go through each of the modal networks, pedestrian, transit, bike, motor vehicle, and consider how it aligns with the vision for the updated transportation system plan. So we'll start with the pedestrian network. While the pedestrian network should arguably be the most accessible to everyone, it is currently not accessible to all. We have missing or inadequate sidewalks. We've got missing or inadequate ramps, unmaintained sidewalks, for example, where tree roots might, pop it up, creating a hazard. And this is preventing some folks from being able to use the network, either forcing them to forego travel altogether sometimes, or to move into moving traffic, right, causing a safety issue. Considering safety, the risks are particularly heightened, as we talked about, for people walking, particularly at intersections and driveways where there is a potential for that collision to happen, and in areas where lighting is low. It's the least expensive and least environmentally impactful mode, but if the quality is lacking and we have a lot of negative externalities like noise or exhaust, it can keep stress levels pretty high for folks and keep people from thriving when they're actually engaged in the activity itself. Transit access is mixed. It's higher, like I mentioned, in the downtown, and higher and denser, more connected areas. In areas that are less dense and less connected, there's less access to public transportation services, for example, in single-family residential areas. So taken from the perspective of a person's entire trip, that completion and quality of the pedestrian network really affects the reliability of being able to get to the transit stop itself. Likewise, the reliability of transit service can be fraught if transit vehicles get stuck in the general purpose traffic. Taking the bus or train, it's a pretty affordable way of traveling. TriMet does offer reduced fares depending on a person's circumstances, and it's pretty safe. Taking the bus or train is pretty safe. It's something that TriMet's thinking about all the time, because even if it is safe, if people don't feel like it's safe, which we know can be the case, particularly if folks are unfamiliar with the service or don't take it very often, then they're probably not going to consider using it. So we did hear that from people as well. On the sustainability front, TriMet is making progress toward electrifying their fleet, replacing diesel buses with electric buses. And I just want to do a shout out to Beaverton School District. They're not a public transportation agency, but they do transport a lot of children in buses, and they are also making great strides to electrify the school bus fleet. The bike network is the network that needs the most work in Beaverton. As it stands now, it offers some painted separation from moving traffic, but not typically barrier or grade separation. The facilities are often located along those fast-moving traffic, and even spaces that are dedicated or delineated by paint, it often drops off once you get to the intersection. So it's not taking people all the way through the point where there is the most conflict. Biking is a relatively affordable mode of transport compared to owning a car, but it's not as affordable as walking. Again, it's generally a low-impact mode, but the way the network is designed today, similarly to the pedestrian network, if the quality isn't there, it's keeping stress levels high and keeping people from thriving while they're engaged in that activity. The motor vehicle network is the most complete of all the modal networks. From a connection standpoint, it's a high level of completion. All destinations are accessible by car. However, from a user perspective, approximately 1 in 3 people can't drive, so it's not directly accessible to about a third of the population. It's also a really expensive mode of travel, both from an infrastructure standpoint and a user standpoint, costing people on average about $12,000 a year to own, maintain, and operate a car. Assuming a household has 2 cars, that means that they're spending about $2,000 a month on being able to get around. And that's a pretty major expense for folks that they could be investing in other things like housing or education, healthcare. And it hits households on tight budgets particularly hard as a percentage of their income. Finally, car travel is the most environmentally harmful mode from every angle: noise, air, water, greenhouse gas emissions. Nearly half, so 48% of greenhouse gas emissions in Beaverton are coming from vehicle travel. That's a pretty steep price to pay. That's going to have both immediate and long-term consequences. Those numbers were just updated through our climate action plan update. Seventh, final takeaway is that community members want action and they want clear communication. Many are ready for change. They want to see changes sooner rather than later. Some suggested quick build projects, pilot projects to test new ideas. We also heard that people are frustrated And it's unclear what the responsibilities are between various entities. We have so many different responsibilities, city, county, other agencies. We heard that from folks as well. So I'm going to pause here. I have a couple more slides about what's going forward, but I want to stop here and open it up to hear if you have any, interested in knowing if any of the engagement takeaways caught your attention, if you have any questions, if you have anything to add.
Any questions? Yes, Commissioner Metler.
In one of the takeaways, it said that the community members were looking for safe crossings. Did they define what a safe crossing meant to them?
Okay. That meant, it meant many different things to people, but people did provide examples. One might just be the timing of a signal. A lot of older people and children just can't make it across very fast. And so that was certainly something that came up a lot. I think something we heard from people with disabilities is that we have inconsistent signals at different intersections, even at the same one, and it can be confusing for people moving through the city having to think differently at every single one. Those are a couple of examples. I would say there are probably many more.
Any other questions? Commissioner McAvoy.
Yeah, thanks for that. That was a lot of information. I appreciate you sort of making it digestible. I thought it was an interesting observation, the number of different jurisdictions that have some sort of authority over various streets in Beaverton. And I wondered, are there any of the main roads, are there any in particular where that's the case and where, where sort of working across or collaborating with those different partners is problematic, not because of the partners, but just because of the complexity of working across jurisdictions? Are there any sort of hot spots for that in the city?
We have a lot of streets that we have partners owning and maintaining. There are a lot of the big streets, so BH Highway, Canyon, Murray, Canyon and BH Highway State, right? But a lot of the other ones, Murray, Shoals Ferry, those are all county. And in some of the material that we'll put out on the website, you can look and see who owns what. I think we even have that in some GIS files somewhere on our website outside of that, but we'll have that up there. I think really the city can advocate for what it wants on those streets, right? And that's going to be a really important, because we have the land use authority around it oftentimes, right? And usually I think they defer to us for what's above the curb, and then they control usually their design, what's below the curb. So I think being able to communicate what our expectations are as a community for how that street fits into the place is going to be really important. Whether we have control over all of that, not necessarily. As we move into prioritization and thinking about the network, I think that it'll be really important to consider how to get folks across them, because they are really serving as some major barrier points within a larger network. And so while we might not necessarily be able to have a stretch designed differently, I think knowing where our priority points to get people over safely and continue those journeys and not have it be such a barrier is going to be really important.
I have a quick question. How did they determine who will be the governing body for the street? I never would have guessed Murray would fall under the county as opposed to the city of Beaverton.
I have no idea. I'm not sure how it originates. I know that there are areas where there has been conversations, especially at the state level, about jurisdictional transfer. You've maybe heard about that in there's like 82nd Avenue over in Portland. They just went through a huge process, and it is a huge process, and it's an expensive process to do a jurisdictional transfer and basically get control over it. And so there are places where that is possible, but you are also taking on all of the maintenance responsibilities and costs and all of that. You get control over the design, but you get also control over all of those expenses. So I think, you know, there's something to be, it's a conversation to have with our partners. And I don't know the original, I don't know how that gets determined originally. I don't know where that gets worked out.
Anna Slatinsky?
Thank you. Anna Slatinsky, Planning Division Manager. Hi. You might not have seen me sneak in. I was late. I just wanted to add a little bit more basic information for the Commission's benefit. Some of the jurisdiction over roadways is really a legacy over time. As Beaverton grew as a city, the city boundaries moved to incorporate areas which were previously part of unincorporated Washington County. And the practice of taking over jurisdiction of all of those streets is not necessarily completely consistent over time. However, when it comes to major arterials and state highways, those are actually part of more regional or statewide networks. So, for example, when we look at Beaverton Hillsdale Highway or Canyon, these are actually seen by the state as state highways, and they serve a purpose, which is that larger scale network. Likewise, major arterials in Washington County are frequently not just currently under their jurisdiction of the county, but the county has a policy interest in managing the county-wide transportation network. Now, there's a lot of crossover there. Obviously, the city has a lot of interest in what happens within city boundaries. And we have lots of coordination. We have shared responsibilities as well. But I hope that provides a little bit of the context about kind of who has responsibility and the authority to make decisions about those streets.
It does, and it raises another question, at least for me. It's like, the question I have is, TV Highway is probably one of the worst roads I've seen as far as safety goes, and you can hit major areas there where it's just dark. That would fall under the state, so how does the city of Beaverton address the safety issues there then?
So we do work with them on several things, and there are 2 projects that are ongoing that you're going to see changes, hopefully along parts of the street. So there, I believe between Hawken and where the other boundary is, maybe 117th, I'm not sure. There's going to be safety, pedestrian crossing, safety enhancement investments going in. Then there's also the TriMet has been working with all of the jurisdictions up and down on the BRT, the Bus Rapid Transit project for the Line 57. And that with those projects often comes upgrades or investments in a lot of the other things that support people getting to the transit stops, so sidewalks and lighting and things like that. So hopefully between those 2, there will be some changes, some sooner than others. The safety project I mentioned is going forward right now. BRT project is still trying to find funding and getting off the ground more.
That was my next question, is funding. So in that situation, would the city pay for those improvements, or would that be a state thing, or would it be kind of a combination?
So larger projects like that often have multiple funding sources coming at it. You got to piece together a lot of money. And typically the city does provide some contribution to a portion of that, but that gets worked out in the details as the project moves on.
Great, thank you. Any other questions?
We talked a lot about speed, and I just wondered, for instance, I'm looking at Hall up through sort of the center of the city and Cedar Hills, and that's all within city jurisdiction, it looks like. What would it look like to change the speed, whether it be through changing posted speed limits or through traffic calming of some kind? Is that feasible, and what are the trade-offs that are associated with that? Are there other sort of changes that would need to accommodate changes in traffic then as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in further stages of this planning project, we are going to look at a couple of different major corridors that we have control over, that being Cedar Hills Boulevard, right? We're interested in looking from basically TV Highway up to Walker. That's the part that we control. And then also Milliken, so from here, essentially, out to TV Highway. And then also Hall Boulevard, so picking up where the loop left off, essentially Fifth down to around the 217 area. And in all of those cases, we're really interested in considering what the trade-offs could be for being able to reallocate space, do some of those traffic calming measures in that area, and what that could look like at a very high level. It's not going to be a corridor level study. It's just going to be more of like, what if, right? And generally, it's if traffic volumes are around 20,000-ish, give or take some, there's considered to be an opportunity to be able to like actually reallocate some of those space, and all of those have traffic volumes at a level that it's worth looking at for us to kind of have that conversation and begin to kind of open it up as a preliminary one.
Interesting. I've got one more follow-up. Sorry, this is just fun stuff. There was a really interesting comment in the report too about how a lot of these corridors are designed for peak travel times. That sort of is like, I think it was 7 to 9 and then whatever the equivalent is. And that inefficient use of space the rest of the time, the majority of the time, right? Just speaking sort of high level, what solutions are there? What creative solutions are there to make more efficient use of that space so that it still can accommodate that sort of pulse in traffic, but isn't just otherwise an empty 4-lane highway the rest of the day?
I'm trying to understand exactly the angle. Like, I mean, people are still going to use it. We still need to move vehicles through the city.
Sure.
So I think the other part is that there's always going to be a lot of people wanting to travel at those times. Like, those are very popular times, and we're growing as a city, so we don't have a lot of space also. So those things are always just going to be true. You know, it's always not going to be the greatest ride at those times of day, and you can't really build your way out of it, to be honest. So I think part of it is demand management, right? So how can you make it so you take some of those folks off of there and open it up a little bit, right? Or provide more alternatives for people to be able to go. So that is part of it. And then the other part of it is, and sometimes these can be related, is also really thinking about the speed controls, right? Like, what can you do to prevent when it is a huge, wide open street, because there's no traffic on it, it's giving cues to drivers to go really fast, because that's what they're feeling. Like, what design things can we do when we're looking at sort of reallocating that space too, that can give people different cues, psychological cues when they're going down a street that is wide open.
Sure. Okay.
Any other questions? All right, thank you very much.
I have a couple more slides if you want to know what's going to come next.
That would be great.
Is that
Let's
okay?
show those.
Okay. So this is talking about where we're at in the process. We completed the existing conditions, part of it, and we are on schedule to begin taking a look at what those modal networks look like. So the pedestrian, bicycle, transit, motor vehicle networks, how they're going to look, how they could function in the future. We're going to begin that in this coming month. And then you can expect to see us again sometime in the spring with some of these ideas. So as we move into defining what a future system should look and function like, we'll be doing that in a couple of different ways. The first is by defining what's included in a complete network. So we'll be defining that for those modal networks. We'll also be looking at how a network functions on its own and in relation to other networks, right? So the good example, again, how the pedestrian network can support somebody trying to get to the bus network. We'll be drafting maps and definitions, what could be included in these complete networks, and expectations for various components like street crossings and street designs that are in alignment with the vision and goals for the plan itself. So the second way is really thinking about that quality of experience for users. So defining what we want for the future in a complete street way. And then finally, I just want to wrap up with some key actions that can advance multiple community goals at once. And you've seen these before, but I think they're really important. I want to emphasize it. This is what council voiced support for back in April. These actions include reducing vehicle speeds, completing those networks, the pedestrian, bicycle, transit networks, completing streets to really achieve those target speeds, that separation and comfort for those vulnerable users, redefining and repurposing public right-of-way, and focusing attention on getting people to where they need to go for those short trips that they're making around town. So what we heard from the community, we had these actions, we proposed those 6 months ago, and we heard from the community really reinforces our commitment to use them to guide future stages of work for this project. So that is all I've got. I just wanted to show you what was on the horizon.
Great, thank you. We are now at the public testimony portion of this agenda item. We'll take testimony for those attending in person first, followed by those attending via Zoom webinar. For those of you viewing via Zoom webinar, please communicate by using the raise hand feature in your Zoom menu bar. If calling in, press *9 to alert the chair that you would like to speak. As a reminder, testimony is limited to the work session item. Do we have any yellow cards? All right, no yellow cards. We have no one testifying in person. We will move to the Zoom webinar. Via Zoom webinar, for those viewing via Zoom webinar, please communicate by using the raise hand feature of your Zoom menu bar. If calling in, press *9 to alert the chair that you would like to speak. Is there virtual public testimony? No. All right. Staff has stated that we do not have any public testimony via the web. Does staff have any final comments?
Thank you for having us this evening.
Yes, you're most welcome. We'll move on to the next agenda item. The final item on the agenda is the approval of the meeting minutes from October 1st, 2025 and October 15th, 2025. Do I have a motion?
Chair, I move to approve the October 1st meeting minutes as submitted.
And do we have a second?
I second.
And we'll open it to discussion. Any discussion? All right. A vote will be taken by roll call. When your name is called, please say A or nay. Commissioner McAvoy.
Aye.
Commissioner McCann.
Aye.
Commissioner Mettler.
Aye.
Commissioner Speck.
Aye.
And Commissioner Winter.
Aye.
I'm an aye for Chair Adams as well. Motion passes unanimously. We are now adjourned at,
Me, Chair. Do the October 15th. Minutes.
I couldn't combine them.
okay.
We need a second motion.
So we need a second motion on the October 15th, 2025.
Chair, I move to submit October 15th minutes as submitted for approval.
Right, do we have a second on the,
Second.
perfect. Any discussion? Perfect. We'll now take a vote by roll call. Your name will be called. Please say A or nay. Commissioner McAvoy.
Aye.
Commissioner McCann.
Aye.
Commissioner Winter.
Aye.
Commissioner Mettler.
Aye.
Commissioner Speck.
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well. It's by unanimous. That passes. So at 7:18, we are now adjourned.